This is Ask Joe number 189, the Frustrated Edition. Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. I'm in a mood because technology sucks sometimes. As you may know, I do Ask Joe every Tuesday at 1 p.m., and most of the time it works flawlessly. Today's technology is being a little jerk. I was already late, and I'm being punished for being late because I can't seem to stream on YouTube like I normally do. So plan B, more like plan H, is to stream on Facebook Live, which you can follow me over at facebook.com/JoeGilderMusic and catch me there. I do other live things occasionally, but YouTube is on my poop list today. That's right, I have a poop list. I keep it right here. See, it's right there. See? Oop. Couldn't see it. All right, so what am I going to talk about today? You know what? I just want to jump into your questions because I'm grumpy, and I think your questions and answering your questions might cheer me up. A couple of quick things, what I've been up to lately. If you missed it, there's still time. I'm doing my annual 12 Days of Christmas giveaway. And the thing about the 12 Days of Christmas giveaway is there's 12 of them. So I'm giving away one of my products every day on both Facebook and YouTube every day for 12 days. Today is day 7, I believe. So you still have a little less than half of the ways to go. So if you want to get in on that, you should have to head over to Facebook or YouTube, find the video for that day's giveaway, leave a comment. That's how you enter to win. Today's video features my cat, Wayne. Tomorrow's video will feature my twins, Maggie and Lila. It's adorable and slightly creepy, so that should be good. Andrew saw it at lunch, so he knows what I'm talking about. Both the adorableness and I'm guessing also the creepiness. All right, I'm going to go see if I can find your questions from earlier. If you have questions in the live stream, ask them there. Johnny Lipsham's here, so all is right with the world. And I've got just a handful of questions on Facebook, so I'm going to need you live streamers, those of you who stuck around for an hour, to hang out with me to fill in the gaps on some questions. One thing I want to talk about really quickly, I wrote an article that's coming out tomorrow about, I was watching, have you seen the rockumentary that Dave Grohl did of Sonic Highways? It's essentially they did an 8 or 9 song album, each one featuring a different city in the U.S., and each song was recorded in that city, and then they did like a TV episode documentary about kind of the music of that town and the history of music in that city. So cities like Nashville, New Orleans, D.C., New York, L.A., Austin, New Orleans. I think I said New Orleans already. And there may be one other in there. I'm missing one of them. But the L.A. one was interesting because they talked about that studio out in Joshua Tree, out in the desert, called Rancho de la Luna, I think. Just this ranch, and they put a bunch of gear in there and crammed people into this tiny house and made records. And Daniel Lanois, who owned all the gear, at least at the start of it, and he's the guy who produced U2 and a bunch of others, he was talking about making Emmylou Harris's record, Wrecking Ball, and how they got everyone in a circle really tight. So it was Emmylou Harris, I'm blanking on names. I think it was, my brain's not working. Just a couple musicians in like a tight circle, and so they had to balance themselves in the recording. They're all playing at the same time. There's drums, a couple guitars, singing. And he was talking about how musicians have the ability to do self-balance. It doesn't have to happen after the fact. And I loved that idea because, as audio folks, we tend to like the fact that we have a lot of control after the fact once we record something. But it's so much better if you can let the musicians be musicians and balance themselves. That's why I love watching bluegrass players when they're doing really traditional bluegrass around one microphone and they all lean in for their solo and lean back when they're playing rhythm. They're controlling their own volume. So anyway, there's an article tomorrow where I'll kind of essentially explain that a little bit more and flesh that out a little bit. But I like the idea. As much as we can do things one at a time and piece things together, because of the technology, I think it's also good to, whenever we can, find ways to let the musicianship just happen and let things happen organically, even sacrifice a little bit of audio quality for the sake of a better performance. I think those kind of things are interesting. I think about stuff like how we may have the guitarist play all the verses first and then have him change his settings and then play the chorus, instead of doing that kind of changes on the fly like you would if he was playing at a show or a concert, and how that's cleaner and might be the right thing for a song sometimes, but sometimes it might be good just to let them play the song from start to finish and really be good musicians. So just something to rant about. It starts to get eerily close to kind of old fart territory where I'm just grumpy and, this is how things should be. But there's an element of, and we keep coming back to this, and we should keep coming back to it, if we find ourselves in a chronic state of polishing turds because we're not recording good musicians, we're not recording good music, and we're not recording it in a way that produces a good performance, then you really can just stop trying to find a new mixing tip that will make your mixes better and go focus on, if you're a guitar player, go focus on playing some guitar. If you're a songwriter, go focus on writing better songs. If you are not a musician, focus all your attention on finding some musicians who can actually perform the things that you want them to perform and create the recordings you're trying to create. Because there's no amount of robots or software or cool mixing hack that's going to get you there. It takes a lot of work and a lot of talent, and those are things that we can hunt down and find. So that's all I have to say about that. Boom. Well, what do you know? I had a rant in me after all. You make me wait an hour for my pho, then yeah, I'm going to have a rant in me. It was delicious, but if you go to that pho place in Cool Springs over off Carruthers, expect to wait a while. Okay. So the video for this on YouTube is going to be funny because I'm recording the video, but I'm streaming here on my phone, so I'm not going to be terribly engaging on one or the other at any given moment. So bear with me there because technology is frustrating. All right, J. Robert Janes, such a great name. You sound like an actor or something, says, any tips for keeping guitars in tune and intonated? Whatever I do, I can't get any of my guitars exactly in tune. Well, could be that you don't have any good guitars. I mean, that's an option. They could just be all cheap guitars that won't stay in tune. Could be that they need a setup. So have them set up by even a local guitar center could do it, or if you have a local guitar tech, maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe you're not putting your strings on properly where you get the tension out of them. If you put strings on and just start playing, it's going to go out of tune. But if you put them on, tune them up, and then do this kind of number on each string, and then tune it up and keep doing that over and over until after bending it, it's no longer drops out of tune, then you've stretched the strings out to where they'll probably stay in tune a little bit better. A lot of intonation stuff comes from how you play. When I switched from playing all electric to all acoustic to also playing electric, I noticed that I'm used to mashing down pretty hard on acoustic to get the note to sound right. But when I mash that hard on electric, it usually goes sharp because the strings are lighter and a little more bendy. So a lot of that came out to me playing it. Having new strings. I hate changing strings. I let my strings go on for too long, but when it starts to not be able to hold a pitch from start to end of a song, which is a big asterisk because if I play a lot of Gibson guitars and they kind of tend to not stay in tune anyway. But if it's more out of tune than normal, then it's usually time to change those strings. Greg says, your thoughts on analog versus digital in live performance? I think digital is cool. The only thing about digital in a live setup is, as we've figured out today, technology can be a total pain in the rumpus. So a digital system possibly more likely to fail. If you've got one of those that you're running off an iPad and your iPad freezes, well, then you're stuck. Analog consoles don't tend to freeze as much, but there's a lot of analog components that can die too. So I don't feel like one's super much more reliable than the other. I will say, as you know, I run the PreSonus Studio Live as my studio mixer, and a part of me, the reason for using it is because I do so much like this, where I'm either streaming or I'm talking and mixing in my voice with the playback from the computer, and I'm doing things like putting a gate and a compressor and a limiter on my voice while it's blended in with the audio so that it all sounds mixed after the fact. I don't have to do any extra post-production work. So that's part of why I use it. But digital system is nice because you can recall stuff. If a kid comes up and turns all the knobs, there's a good chance you can just go recall the settings as they were before, however you saved them. That kind of stuff's nice. On an analog system, you can't do that. Otherwise, and a digital system, especially something like the Studio Live, has the option to run a FireWire cord to a laptop and record the whole show. To do that in an analog system takes a lot more gear, splitter snakes, cable snakes, an audio interface that'll allow all those inputs, and then the computer to record it. That starts to get pretty pricey. So if I would, if it was me, I'd probably get like a PreSonus board so that I could offer the service of recording the show if I'm the engineer or if I'm the artist. It's nice to record all your shows, and maybe when you capture a magical moment, let that be a live album, and you're not doing any extra work other than bringing your laptop with you and plugging it in and hitting record and making sure you have enough hard drive space. So those are some things that come to mind when I think of that question. Brian Santos asks over on Facebook, do you find it hard to produce yourself? Maybe it's more procrastination than a producing issue, but I never get music out there because I always think I can do that part better, or I need to make this arrangement more exciting, etc. It's a good question. I don't think I have any super great answer for you, Brian. There could be so many things at play. It could be, I'm sensing all the kind of grumpiness coming out of me today, but it could be that if you're having a hard time producing yourself, maybe if you're good at producing other people, not good at producing yourself, maybe you're not as good a musician as the other people you're producing. And so maybe you have a higher standard and you're not capable as an artist to produce that higher standards. Therefore, you're not capable of doing anything that you would be super proud of as a producer. That's a conundrum, but hopefully you can have enough self-awareness to know that and either work with someone else who can get a better performance out of you, or work on yourself as a musician to improve the things you're good at to get to a point where you're more happy with them. I think those are valid options. I think the other thing is we always are going to be more critical of our own stuff. I don't know if there's a way around that, or at least that initial inclination, that initial gut reaction to not like anything that we've done, that goes away over time. So Brian, I think if we were sitting down having coffee, I would say, okay, how many songs have you worked on of your own music? A lot of times when people are having these kind of questions, they haven't worked on much. They've worked on a song or two. And I would say, don't even worry about it. Just keep working on stuff. It's kind of like people say, I hate hearing my own voice on a voicemail, because they're not used to it. At some point you get used to it and you hear your voice and you think, yeah, that's my voice. Or you listen to yourself so closely and you hear all the flaws, and so it makes you as a singer go back and fix those things over time, which is what happens for me a lot of times. Obviously, I love the sound of my own voice at this point because I hear it so much, whether it's through podcasts or videos or recording my own music and recording background vocals for other people. I've gotten good at recording myself and mixing myself to where I can get a good tone really quickly. But I've also improved by all that critical listening. I've noticed that, over the years, things like how I tend to, things like vowel sounds for me have improved over the years of listening to recordings and saying, man, every time I sing that O sound and kind of a sort of sound is, if I don't have a really round vowel sound, then I tend to go flat. And I think about stuff when I took proper voice lessons, it was all about vowel sounds, a big chunk of it, with the little consonants in between. But so thinking about how to translate that and how that's helped me get better, hearing, okay, I always go flat on that note on that song. What is it about that? Oh, it's because I'm singing it let me sing it differently, open my mouth more or something, which I don't open my mouth very much when I sing anyway, which a lot of you are commenting on lately, and that's just the way it's going to be. I'm not going to change it now. Or, it could be things like, for me, learning how to sing into a microphone in a way that produces a better mix later. And things like that. So those are things that come over time. And yeah, initially, I don't think anybody loves the sound of their own voice when they first record it. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have a bad voice. It's just one of those natural weird things that we do. So I'd say stick with it, keep at it, and it'll become less weird for you over time. Lakshay from India, who always joins us, at least the last couple of months, has been a faithful follower on YouTube whenever we do these live. Don't know if you made it over to the Facebook live stream on today's messed up technology day, but asked a question on Facebook, says, "Hey, Joe, won't be able to attend." Oh, there's my answer. He's visiting the SAE Institute in Melbourne in the morning. Okay, great. That wasn't a question. Fantastic. SAE is all over the place. I've known some folks that have gone there. Excuse me. This is from Brett Conroy. He says, "What or who made you want to get into music?" That's a good question. For me, I grew up in a fairly musical family, so my mom is a great piano player. My dad plays guitar, nylon string guitar. They both sing, so they both would sing and play as I was growing up, and I grew up singing in the choir at my church a lot and taking piano lessons and started singing solos and stuff as early as kindergarten when I sang Winnie the Pooh song. It's a great story for another day. So a lot of that got me into music. Once I had a guitar in my hands was when it started to happen pretty quickly. I learned guitar fairly quickly, taught myself to play using hold that thought. This is a great question because of my new prop here. As you can see, I showed you this a couple weeks ago. When I went home for Thanksgiving, my mom gave me this. This is what I used to go to piano lessons. I would walk. Our piano teacher lived up the street for a while. I would literally walk with this little satchel in my hand, and it had my piano books inside, so little lesson books and whatnot. But the first song I learned on guitar, my parents still have the sheet music. Here you go. Are we giving any guesses? Any guesses as to what the first song I learned on guitar was? Boom, right there. I don't know if you can see it in both cameras. "I Can Love You Like That," recorded by John Michael Montgomery. Oh boy. But as you probably know, if you're a guitar player, you can see it gives you the chords. There's the sheet music, the piano music, and then the chords are above with the little chart that shows you where to put your fingers. And so I looked at that and said, that looks like a guitar. And then I looked at the guitar, and so I just matched up on there where your fingers go. And the rest, as they say, is history. So yeah, that's how I started, and that got me into eventually writing music and performing and playing in a band. That was really interesting. The thing for me was I learned about the phrase music business. I read it in a book somewhere, and I said, "What's that?" And so that kind of got me down the road of looking into music business schools and got into recording around that time. So it all kind of runs together. But that's a really rambly answer to a fairly simple question. I guess there's no more questions on the old Facebook, so we're going all to the stream, folks. Johnny Lipsham says, "I used to hate my voice. Now I love it." See? There you go. And he's trying to learn to sing with no accent. I try to sing without an accent, too. When people find out I'm from Mississippi, they get surprised. They say, "You don't sound terribly Southern and hickish." Not hickish, but it just depends on who I'm talking to. If I talk to my family on the phone, it comes out pretty strong. Alan Bailey says, "Did you ever have a tuner running, or was that just your ears picking up the guitar being out of tune when you were live streaming the guitar being recorded the other night?" Good question. I would love to be able to say that. What? Shush. Nash wants to go outside. I'd love to say that I did it all by ear. I do the bulk of it. So that particular session that I streamed, I had my pedal board set up over here in the floor, and I had a cable running to my acoustic. So I wasn't recording direct, but I was tuning direct. So did the initial tuning that way. But once that was done, as you probably well know, it can say it's in tune on the tuner, but then you strum a chord, or that was in dadgad tuning. So I'd play like a G with the bass note on the 5th fret, and that was a little sharp. So I would adjust the tuning by ear to get to where that note sounded a lot better, and then I would record from there. So it's by tuner first, and then by ear if something sounds wonky, which, things tend to sound wonky. Hey, Joe, I started experimenting with MS mic technique for recording acoustic guitar. Any suggestions or insights I should know? Don't get too far down the rabbit trail. Mid-side can be cool. It can be a little bit of a waste of time, especially in a home studio where the the side mic is going to pick up a lot of noise because we don't live in super great sounding environments. So you're pointing microphones away from the source to the left and the right, which to me seems like maybe not a great idea. But you can get a decent stereo image out of it. So I say play with it, but when in doubt, use one mic and make it sound great. Chandra, how to get rid of the buzz from my Strat? Turn off all lights if you have any fluorescent lights, or if you're standing close to a refrigerator. That can happen. If you saw my live stream from the weekend, it was Saturday night. My buddy Spencer, the guy who plays guitar in my band, we're recording on Frankie's EP, and normally I have him right here, so his pedal board is right next to me. I'll show you on the stream. That's his pedal board over there. He left it here. Normally I have him right here next to me, and then kind of sitting or standing somewhere over here. But his Telecaster, which is a single coil guitar, was buzzing quite a bit. He could turn certain ways and it got better, but it still was pretty noticeable. So I had him move around, and finally I had him move into the bathroom over there, and something about being in there blocked whatever interference he was picking up, and it was silent. So we set up his pedal board in a chair in the bathroom because it was the best sounding spot, and went from there. So it's single coil pickups pick up stuff like an antenna. So if you're in an apartment building where you've got neighbors with fluorescent lights, there's not much you're going to be able to do about it. You can try to remove the noise after the fact using software. I don't love that approach. Sometimes it's just a matter of walking around the room and finding that right spot. Better cables can help a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, part of the buzz is just the charm of a single coil guitar like a Strat or a Tele, but there are some things you can do to make it better. A lot of it's trial and error, to be honest with you. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. The question before was, you were talking about the guy playing in the bathroom. Yeah, he has a tuner. But when he was playing, there was a chord he was playing where one string was just didn't sound right. That I just heard by ear, which again is one of those things like getting used to hearing your own voice. If you get used to what an in-tune guitar sounds like because you play it for thousands of hours on your own, then the out-of-tune one becomes a little more obvious. So like at this point, I just probably because I have decent ears and I can hear things fairly well, but also because I've spent countless hours with a guitar in my hands. He can play a guitar and I can say, hey, your G string's out of tune. Sometimes I can say, hey, it's sharp or flat, but can't do that all the time. But I can occasionally listen and say, oh yeah, the B string is out of tune. I can just hear it because I can hear what kind of chord he's playing and which note is out of tune. So that's kind of stuff that I think most people could do if you just listen and spend a lot of time with it. Hey Joe, how do you feel about adding color with analog hardware? I mean, I like analog hardware, but not so much for the color. Let me show you what I use. Over here to my left, these are my preamps that I use. So obviously all PreSonus because I'm a fanboy. But ADL 700 is a tube pre. That's what I'm running through right now for my voice. ADL 600 is 2 channels of that same preamp minus all the channel strip stuff. The Eureka up here on the top is just a transformer non-tube solid state pre that sounds great as well. I like preamps like this mainly because they tend to give me more gain than the stock preamps can give me, tend to be a little bit cleaner, have a little more, there's a little more power behind them, so I can get a little more volume out of them. So that's usually my bigger reason for liking outboard equipment. As far as warming things up, I mean, I do like the sound. Honestly, I like the functionality more than the sound. I don't really take like a recording and then run it through a piece of analog gear to warm it up. But I do like when I'm recording something through that ADL 700, I like to use the compression and the EQ when it makes sense to change the tone and get the tone a little more like I want it. If I can mix it there where it sounds like I want it to in the mix, then I guess what I don't have to do later, right? I already have the tone I want, or at least I'm partially part of the way there. Mark says, ever thought about bussing, mixing through hardware compressors and EQs? Yeah, I've thought about it. You know, when I pull out the latest Sweetwater catalog and I see all the 500 series modules you can get for a couple, $600 each, and think about filling up a rack with those. There's a convenience factor to being all in a digital system that I can't get over. I've even mixed through my mixer before, and even just the simple process of recalling a mix on here to make changes for a client, even when it's mostly saved and all I have to do is move the faders back to where they were, even that is kind of a pain. So the ability to pull up a mix and have it be in seconds, be exactly where it was when I left off so I can make changes, instead of having to, if I ran the mix through this preamp or this 2-channel, compressor or something, then I have to write down the settings and keep track of those and then know what I sent through there. And then if I have to redo something, I have to run it back through there and set the settings exactly the same. It's not like that's not worth doing if it sounds really great, but at the end of the day, what makes a mix sound good for me is my ears and what I hear and how I make it sound like I want it to sound. I can do that with the tools I have in basic plugins, or I haven't seen them as lacking at this point. So could I get a little different tone out of the hardware if I ran through it? Maybe. Would it be different? I don't know, because my ears are wanting to hear a certain thing. And so whatever tools I'm using, I'm going to manipulate them until that sound comes out of the speakers. So in a sense, it doesn't matter what I use. Some tools might get me there quicker, or some tools might be so great but so different that they change how I even listen, to the point where it changes the sound that I want to come out of the speakers. That's an option too. But for the most part, I don't think, for me, it's something that I'm going to pursue anytime soon, if at all. Johnny says the new 32-channel mixer would be ideal for that tactile hands-on mixing experience. Yes, PreSonus has a 32-channel board. It is nice to have hands-on faders, but even then, having the fader port and being able to click around a session and have 70 tracks all on their own, with their own processing and not have to bust things down to a mixer is nicer too. So I haven't mixed through this board in a long time. Just use it for tracking and mixing live, like when the band's here and we're all playing together. I have it all mixed through, which is nice, but I haven't mixed through the board in a while. And part of it is this is the older Studio Live. I don't love the compressors on here. I'm not big on having lots of compressors, but the ones on here tend to be a little harsh. I feel like I end up having to use a de-esser more when I compress heavily on here sometimes. But if you want to hear an album that was mixed on one of these boards, go listen to my hymns album called Help of the Helpless. I actually mixed that through a 12-channel, the smaller, the 1202 or the smaller PreSonus board that has 12 faders instead of this bigger 24 one. And, I had to do a lot of bussing and sub-mixing, and still turned out sounding fine, again, because I knew what I wanted the sound to be, and I just made the thing make that sound. Paul says, what's a good budget small diaphragm condenser that you could recommend? I want to capture more transients that I don't feel like I'm capturing with my large diaphragm condenser. Well, I will say I will challenge your first assumption that you're going to really capture much more transients than you currently are, just by switching to a small diaphragm condenser. Yes, technically it will be more detailed, but also it's probably going to pick up more of other things you may not want it to pick up. So I don't know, to be honest, Paul, if it'll do what you're wanting it to do, versus just a different large diaphragm condenser that has a brighter sound to it that you'll think is capturing more transients, but it's just brighter, and that might be what you want to. That said, the Rode NT5s are pretty popular. I've got a couple of Earthworks SR25s, which they're more expensive, but I got them at a really sweet deal as a kit, so I use those some. I don't find myself using small diaphragms all that much, though, I'll be honest. Just occasionally. And yes, I did get the SM7 back. After it was long gone, my friend finally returned it. He thought he had returned it. He was wrong. He had actually bought more because he liked using it. He bought like 3 more and then forgot to return mine. So now I have it back, and it's fabulous. And it's funny, I didn't use it, and I was fine without it, but I'm glad to have it back because I've been using that more now too. So good stuff. All right, well, everybody, I think I'm going to call this a wrap. Things have gone on way longer. Took me way longer to get this thing working. Okay, one final question, then I'll call it a day. Mark says, do you feel virtual amps are getting indistinguishable to real amps when recorded? I don't know if they're indistinguishable because I don't have the real amps to compare. I've got 3 guitar amps, none of which are super high-end. I've got the Fender Deluxe Reverb is probably my nicest amp. And I will say the Deluxe Reverb model in my 11 rack sounds kind of similar. Is it exactly the same? I don't know. But my whole album Better This Way, almost all the electrics on there are through the Avid 11 rack, which isn't even one of the high-end amp modeling deals. And I think, again, the technology is good enough to where if you know what tone you want, you'll probably be able to get it to come out of whatever you're using, especially if it's one of those virtual systems where you've got lots of amp models to to choose from. But again, the ultimate variable is what your ears hear and what sound you're trying to make. But yeah, I will say I've played through the Kemper. It's awesome. And there's a convenience factor there of not having to, A, be really loud because you can just use headphones, and B, not having to mic something up and run cables and do all that. You just plug it right in. That's nice. It can be kind of cool. So I see merit to both. I've done both pretty extensively, and I like both. I'm currently an amp guy right now. My 11 rack is sitting here, and I haven't turned it on in a while. So that doesn't mean I hate it. I just am getting the tones I want elsewhere for the time being. So it's all an ever-evolving process, especially for us guitar folks. We are a fickle and ever-changing bunch. All right, thanks so much for tuning in and for listening. If you're here live, thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience with the old stupid stream thing not working like it was supposed to. If you're listening to the recording or watching the video online at some later date, thank you for your time. Don't forget to check me out on Facebook and YouTube and sign up for the email newsletter. Check out Mix Together. That's going really well, and it's really fun. Free tracks for you to mix, along with a free series of videos where I mix it from start to finish. If you don't know what that is, go find it. It's pretty cool. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. See ya.